Hello, this is Dr. Stanley Lang, and I'm talking today on the topic of processed foods equals damaged foods. And the specific food that I'm going to be talking about today is known as Fairlife milk. Most of the videos you're going to see on the internet are going to have glowing reviews of how wonderful this is. I'm going to give some perhaps a cautionary tale. I'm also known as the Whole Health Doc because I promote and practice whole person health medicine, and I've been doing this for several decades. So I have a lot of years of experience in this particular area, which is food and what is healthy food and what is not healthy food. And one thing I can tell you for sure is that processed foods are damaged foods. Now, processed foods are just part and parcel of the modern food industry. One of the things that I tell my patients is that if you go down the cereal aisle, what you're going to do is see a lot of foods that what the food industry did is they disassembled everything, then they put it back together, except they left out some of the key ingredients, and then they added some nutrients, and then they called it fortified. So we end up with this food that has less than the original, but it's a supposedly fortified food. And this topic came up a few months ago for me because of a patient who had a very, very unusual set of symptoms. She was burping all the time, and she couldn't figure out why she was burping all the time. So she had some other GI symptoms, but that was her major symptom. And so we did a very thorough food history, and she admitted that she'd been drinking some milk. So we talked a little bit about milk. I'd never heard of milk per se causing this particular kind of symptom. And then it happened to be that she mentioned that she's drinking this new type of milk, and particularly the chocolate version of it, which appears to be the most attractive one for people. And as I looked at the ingredients, it was apparent to me that this was the likely problem for her. And the ingredients that drew my attention that I was most concerned about were three of them: acesulfame, which is a sweetener, artificial sweetener. It's been around for a long time, used a lot in different things, supposedly safe. Sucralose, which is another artificial sweetener. So here we've got two artificial sweeteners in the supposedly healthier than normal milk, and then this thickener, which is called carrageenan. Now, all three of these have some substantial health problems. I'm going to talk about each one of them individually. But before I get there, the whole thing behind this milk is not that different from the story I told you about cereal. Their claim to fame with this milk is that they separate everything out. They take the proteins out, they take the fats out, they take the sugar out, and then they put back everything, and they have more protein than regular milk and less sugar than regular milk, as if milk has a lot of sugar to start with. Supposedly, when you end up with this, it's a whole lot healthier for you. Now, there's a lot of unknowns about what's going on here, but we do know that they admit that they use an ultra pasteurization process, so their temperature is quite a bit higher than usual pasteurization, and we know that damages proteins when you pasteurize milk. So guess what happens when you use higher temperature? More damage. How much research has been done on what that does to humans when they consume these damaged proteins? None. No long-term studies on what happens when we consume these ultra-pasteurized damaged proteins. Now, maybe there's no problem at all, but maybe there is. The point is, nobody's done this research. You're the guinea pig when you're drinking this stuff. So we'll talk about these three nutrients, or so-called nutrients or additives. The carrageenan is made from seaweed, and it's a common thickener, and it's considered safe by the government without any. The problem with these so-called safety claims is that there aren't any safety studies. So to make a safety study that prove safety, you would have to do human studies for years to know what happens. Well, there aren't any human studies at all, and if there are any animal studies, they're usually a few weeks long at the most, if that long. And so when you look at the actual data on what proves safety, it's not there. Are there lots of complaints? Yes, it causes lots of different symptoms. It clearly disturbs the bowel. There's a lot of other issues I won't get into with carrageenan, just to say that it's a questionable nutrient at best. And to put it into a supposedly healthier than normal milk doesn't make sense, to me at least. Now, this acesulfame is a sweetener that has, it's been around for a long time, several decades. Again, no long-term studies on it, and claims that the studies that have been done have been safe. Well, when you track down these studies, first of all, they're really hard to find. And second of all, they don't amount to a hill of beans in terms of proving safety. But if you look at some of the few studies that do show that actually try to dig into what happens when you feed, like mice, this particular additive, the sweetener, well, I'll just give you one of the things that happens. It starts to damage their brains. It starts to affect their cognition. That means their ability to think. Now, it's pretty hard to measure how mice think, but you can kind of look at behavior and draw some deductions. So there's different protocols on understanding whether mice are damaged in terms of their neurological systems. And lo and behold, yes, they are damaged when they consume this particular sweetener long enough. Well, I'm sure that the business model for the company that's making this particular milk is not for just to drink it for 4 weeks and then you're done with it. The idea is to get you hooked on this for months and years if possible. So yes, you're going to be a long-term consumer of this. And they have multiple other products that have the same sweeteners in it. So it also disturbs the microbiome. So when you add stuff that messes up the microbiome, you are definitely damaging your body. You're damaging your immune system, and you're setting yourself up for all sorts of chronic diseases. If you just list the chronic diseases that are part of our contemporary experience, they're related to the microbiome being messed up. Now, the third ingredient that I sort of pulled out that's on the list is sucralose, a well-known sweetener. Has a brand name called Splenda. It's not the only source of sucralose. You don't have to put Splenda in something to have sucralose. You can just put sucralose in. And the sucralose does two things we know of that aren't good. Number one is also disturbs the microbiome significantly. That means that it gives a competitive advantage to the wrong bacteria to thrive and suppresses the good bacteria. That's what happens when the microbiome gets messed up or changed in some way. The second thing that it does is it actually worsens insulin resistance, which means that if you're on the diabetic spectrum, it's pushing you in that direction. It doesn't help you lose weight, it helps you gain weight. So these three ingredients are in this so-called improved version of milk. Now, there's a whole lot of other things that are issues with this whole company and the way that they bring their product to market. But I just want to say this is par for the course. They're not any different than most other companies that are putting so-called food out there if it's processed. If they processed it, they took stuff out, they put stuff back together, and they left some of the key ingredients out, and they may or may not have fortified it, but I guarantee you it ended up worse for you. So what's the solution? Don't eat any kind of processed foods. So that means fruits, vegetables, the proteins that you consume are not processed. The fats that you consume are not processed. And that lets you pretty much do some pretty easy shopping. You go into the grocery store and you stay on the outside, and you're pretty much not exposing yourself to the processed meals, foods. And then you sort of go down that organic aisle that's sort of stuck in the middle of the store to kind of suck people into the middle of the store and avoid all the other aisles. And then you're safe. Then you check out quickly before you're sucked into something that's bad for you. And then you go home and you cook real food instead of this processed stuff. So what happened when this patient stopped this milk? Her symptoms went away. Now, why did they go away? Because I'm sure that what happened was that her microbiome was so screwed up that her bowel didn't know whether to move stuff forward or backwards. That's why she was burping all the time. And if you feel sick, guess what? Your biome is all messed up too. Now, I saw a patient today who had we had just done a kind of an experiment to see if milk might be causing her abdominal pain. And in follow-up, lo and behold, her abdominal pain had completely gone away. So her mom figured out, yes, lactose was the problem. And so she was going out for lactose-free milks. Well, guess what? This particular brand brands themselves as lactose-free because that's one of the things they do when they separate out all the ingredients. They take the lactose out. And so here she is drinking this supposedly healthy lactose-free milk after she's finally recovered from her abdominal pain. And so she's going to be consuming something that's going to totally mess up her microbiome. And that's how sneaky this stuff is. Again, I don't fault these companies. They're in the business for making money. And the government allows them to market this stuff. It's legal to do. They're not breaking any laws. They're not breaking any laws in terms of putting this ingredients into the food because the government lets them do that too with no studies for safety. That's your government's fault. It's not this food company's fault. They're just following the rules to make a product. I'm saying that if you want to be healthy, you need to avoid that stuff. And if you want to learn how to be healthy completely in what I would call a whole person health approach, I invite you to join our Health Academy. You can get access for 7 days completely free. There's a link below this video. I encourage you to join if you want to learn how to be healthy, if you're tired of feeling stressed out all the time, if you're tired of carrying the extra weight around, if you're tired of being tired, click on the link to join the Health Academy for 7 days free. Hope you found this information helpful, and I encourage you to avoid processed food. God bless and have a great day.